There's a, oh no. Okay, so we're live, and we'll just wait a moment for people to hop on the stream. For anyone who is joining us at the beginning, we are Stand Up, Fight Back. So just give it a moment and see who hops on. So just stretch your arms. This is a good time to stretch. This is going to be for an hour. And get your cup of water, take a sip. So I see some people now are with us. So hi, everybody. Why don't we get started? Thank you for watching. This is Stand Up, Fight Back. So as you may or may not know, my name is Margot Paez. I'm a scientist, engineer, and an occasional journalist. And I'm here with my co-host, Carlos Marroquin. He's a wonderful grassroots organizer here in California. You're watching our weekly Sunday show. This is our evening edition of Stand Up, Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. We simulcast on Facebook and YouTube, so please subscribe, share this with your friends, your family, and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. Today is a really, really important one. We have two special guests with us. We have Andrea Leon-Grossmann, who is a climate action director with Azul and works in the Latinx community to protect and conserve our coasts and oceans. And we also have Michelloe Manos, another amazing grassroots organizer from the Los Angeles area. Carlos, would you mind telling us a little bit about our guests tonight?
Yes, I think it's really important. First of all, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, wherever you may be watching us from. It is another Sunday that full of different things happening all around us. And just before I introduce the guests, or at least tell you in part some of my relationships with them, again, we'd like to welcome everybody. And our thoughts are with everybody out there that is suffering so tremendously right now due to the pandemic and to the many crises that they are facing. We are on this thing together. We're dealing with so much. And what we are trying to do is connect you with people. Look at the work that some of the people are doing. In this case, Andrea, she's been out there fighting the good fight for years already. And so many things that puts us in touch with what's happening on the ground. This is the kind of people that we are bringing to you. And of course, you all know Michelloe Manos, that has been, or it is rather, the co-founder of Bernie Coffee Shop. And again, another great organizer here in Southern California that organizes behind issues. And Andrea, I have met her years ago, again, working on the environment, and a great person to be around because she's also full of knowledge. As you will see today, the amount of information that she provided us. I know she reached out to me this week and say, Carlos, take a look at this, and it is important for us to be in touch with our grassroots leaders and organizers and advocates, because they are bringing to us the awareness of the things that are happening in our communities. And that is the case with Andrea and with Michelloe Manos. Margaret?
Sorry, yes, I was trying to share this. Yes, great, thank you. So I think, Andrea, why don't we get started? Let's hear from you first so you can give us some background on what's going on with this Poseidon desalination plant, maybe like a little bit of the history of how this came to be in California and the urgency around what's going on.
So for the last 20 years, Poseidon has been trying to build a desalination plant off of Huntington Beach. And the main reason is not necessarily because that's the best land or coastline to build a desalination plant. It's mostly because that's the best geopolitical place to build it, because there's a lot of conservative politics going on, although the tides are changing. So they have been applying for permits, a discharge permit, what they call that, in terms of discharge meaning a brine that is going to be the byproduct of this desalination plant. So every 5 years they apply for this permit, and now they're at that 5-year mark where they have to apply for that 5-year permit to get over that line, the finish line, to build this thing. It's being surrounded by a lot of controversy because they have a track record of not really being a good corporation in general. They built a desalination plant in Florida, and it's been riddled with problems. So in 2010, they started eyeing another plant in Carlsbad, and they actually managed to get that through with all the different regulators and the Coastal Commission. So they built that. Now we know exactly what kind of problems we will have with something like that, besides eroding the human right to water that we actually passed in California in 2012. So it's really concerning, especially now that we see how vulnerable communities are taking a huge hit disproportionately with some crises like the pandemic and the economic crisis. So the last thing that we need right now is to build a boondoggle with private money, with public money for private gain, that it's actually for a foreign corporation, because that now Poseidon is owned by Brookfield Asset in Canada. So none of the profits are even going to stay in the US. So we really do not need to put public money for private profit, especially if it's for a foreign corporation.
So who is connected to the building or the investment in this project within the California government?
So Jerry Brown was a big proponent, and he took money from Poseidon. And Kathleen Brown is actually, who's Jerry Brown's sister, is one of the representatives for Poseidon. We also know that Governor Newsom actually has taken money from Poseidon for his inauguration committee. So he's also being very much in favor of this project. His friend and advisor, as well as a lobbyist for Poseidon, is Jason Kenney, who he was caught having dinner in the middle of this pandemic right when he asked Californians to shelter in place. And he was willing to break all protocols just to celebrate Jason Kenney at this super expensive, fancy restaurant. So we know for the last 2 years, the last report that we saw, Poseidon spent $500,000 just lobbying with Axiom Advisors. And that's just what we know from one of the lobbying firms. But we can tie 6 different lobbying firms to Poseidon. And again, it's like, who needs that big power in terms of lobbying to put something through? And it's really an environmental justice issue, because who's going to speak for the most vulnerable? Poor people cannot even afford half a lobbyist. And again, we really need to speak for the human right to water, and we need to strengthen that, not weaken it. And when the pandemic began, we were really concerned about how the Brown Act took a hit and was gutted, basically. And now there's all kinds of issues with public comment. One of the first online meetings that we had with the Regional Water Board was a 12-hour meeting. And we know essential workers cannot take 12 hours off their day to give a 2-minute public comment. And they cannot stay online for 4 hours to see what this project is about. Again, they're essential workers. They're people who have to go and work day in and day out, sometimes more than 2 jobs. And again, it's just so concerning what is going on. And many of them don't even know that this is basically in the works and that our governor is pushing for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Again, some of the issues here is public money going to for private benefit, and that's one thing. But we also have the strength of the lobbyist speaking to the governor, whispering to the governor. So the reason we want to be able to speak about this and shift from Washington politics is to show the stuff that's going on locally and how we need to focus on these things. you know, Andrea, you have a lot of information here. We're talking about some serious lobbying taking place right now. And if we are not at the table ourselves and we are not aware of what's happening, this is how we blow so much money, and we don't see anything trickling down to our communities.
That's right. They're saying, there's a saying that says, if we're not sitting at the table, we're on the menu. And I think we have been on the menu for too long. And we really need to sit at the table. And the problem is that many of us who have been asking to meet with the governor's office, we just get the door. We can't get through that door. And we're concerned about how the governor is now packing the commissions and the boards with business-friendly people and not with consumer advocates. We had a really good member for the regional water board who's not even an environmentalist. He's an engineer. And he was just asking common sense questions like, do we need this plant right now? Do we need it that big? Do we need to have it right here? I mean, again, it's not something that he was not even questioning a lot of the pollution or, any of that. He was just first like really asking questions that anyone with common sense would ask. And he was promptly removed as soon as his term was up. And one of the concerns that we had with that was not only for Poseidon, but for any projects or policies coming down the pipe. Because again, he was someone who had know-how in terms of engineering and other knowledge that is really going to be hard to replace with, especially now that he was replaced with someone whose mentor is the founder of the front group for Poseidon.
So you're saying an engineer that was part of the water board, or where was he employed exactly?
So he was appointed by the former Governor Brown, and when your term is up, you get usually a grace period of 2 months, and then you can get reappointed, or you can actually get ousted. And he was ousted 15 days after his term was up. And it was not even when all the appointments are announced. So Governor Newsom was in a hurry to get him out as soon as he could, because he was basically slow, in his words, kind of what we heard, slowing this project down.
So tell us a little bit about what are the environmental implications of this desalination plan, and what are the financial implications for people who need water? I mean, right now, most of the water, my understanding, is coming from groundwater aquifers and from the snowpacks in Sierras. And then also some of it comes in from the Colorado River, I think, to balance out when there's a lack of water, right, from California sources. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we get a lot of imported water from the Colorado and then some from the Delta. And we do know that the Delta is over allocated. But especially in North Orange County, we have plenty of water, underground water. And the most expensive water we can ever source is desalinated water. I mean, by far. And it's really energy intensive. Again, the most energy intensive, the most expensive. And basically, this type of plant will use the same amount of energy as 35,000 homes day in and day out. So when we are all urged to conserve, when we have really hot days where, basically we're getting more and more of them every year because of climate change, this plant will have to keep operating because it's basically supplying water. And now if this thing goes through, people will be counting on this source of water. And then they can only desal about half of the water. So the other half is basically this really salty brine that they dump back into the ocean along with other chemicals. The plant in Carlsbad has been fined over and over again because they discharge more salty water than they anticipated. And it was actually off in April when we had a red tide with this luminescent algae that people were kind of fascinated by because it was glowing in the dark. But thanks to that, people in the district, for the water district, they were able to save $10 million over 2 weeks. And thanks to that, they were able to balance the budget. But you shouldn't be counting on your desalination plant being down to be able to balance your budget. Again, it's super expensive water. The plant, right now, what they're advocating for is to get a 50-year take-or-pay contract. So in super wet years, when we get more water than we need, we will still have to pay for this water. And then at the end of the 50-year contract, they will hand it over to the state so that we as taxpayer will have to decommission it. So it's a really, it's not a good deal for anyone except Poseidon.
So I want to, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
We haven't really exhausted any of the other avenues in terms of looking at stormwater capture and rainwater capture. And the difference, stormwater capture is more the wholesale type of capture that the city does. Rainwater is more what the people can do in their own homes. We haven't exhausted efficiency. I mean, if you look at what the per capita consumption is, usually in Orange County is around 150 gallons per person. And people who really had no option but do desalination like in Israel is about 50 gallons per person. So, I mean, you could see the amount of water that we're really using and how we're using it.
And I want to put this in a bigger context, because you're touching on a lot of really important issues. And I know we often focus on the show on all the stuff that's affecting California, because that's sort of where our network is. But this is a really important issue, because this ties in with climate change, and the entire world is affected by climate change. And it's really important to address, because here we are, we're trying to set up, well, not we, but these corporations are trying to set up these desalination plants. And on the one hand, on the face value of it, it's great, yeah, because of course, California itself, it doesn't have a lot of water, and sure, we're getting into these we have these longer drought periods because of the climate change. And therefore, that means that we'll be depleting our water resources in the state and, of course, elsewhere. But the thing is that if you're going to set up a desalination plant, it's going to require energy, because it's a little bit of science here. But basically, you have to take the water molecule and split it up, right? I'm sorry. So wrong thing. You have to take the salt out of the water. I was thinking of electrolysis here. I almost did an experiment with some kids, and it did exactly that. But no, you don't split up a water molecule. You're taking the salt out of the water. And so the thing is that when you put salt in the water, it actually releases energy. But when you take it out, you need to put in energy in there to break the bonds. So that's a little technical, but it's important, because that energy has to come from somewhere. And right now, our grids are powered primarily by fossil fuels. So if we are going to be setting up these desalination plants on the coastal areas of this country, without addressing the fossil fuel consumption, we are increasing our carbon emissions, which is only fueling our issue of climate change and worsening the climate crisis. So sure, on the face value, this sounds great, but as Andrea has pointed out, it's an absolute disaster. So we really, nationally, this is really important. So any of our viewers out there are not in the state of California, please continue to watch, because Carlos and Michelle and Andrea are going to also discuss ways in which people can get involved to stop this, because this doesn't just affect the state of California, this affects everyone. Because if we have corporations in the state of California increasing carbon emissions, this is going to affect you wherever you live. So I just wanted to make sure we had this context here. And now, Andrea, Carlos, and Michelle, would you like to ask any questions, Carlos, of either of them, or Michelle? Do you have any thoughts? We have not really given you a chance to speak. Mm-hmm.
I know that Michelle worked on the Keep It on the Ground campaign with oil and stuff, and the need again. She's also working with a lot of the crises that we are facing, like homelessness or housing. These are things that directly impact us. Michelle, this is a tough one, because we have seen how much money is pushed. This company's push just to get these projects going, and then at the same time, you are a witness of how little resources, the real issues that are affecting the people right now are getting or not getting.
Right. So yes, thank you. And Andrea, thank you for that incredible information and really breaking it down. It's important that we understand these things. Carlos, you're correct. I was actually the campaign coordinator for the Oil Money Out campaign in I want to say 2018. We delivered almost 100,000 signatures to, at the time, Governor Brown, demanding that he stop allowing lobbyists to influence whether or not we have fracking or where we drill and things like that. So, of course, we spent a lot of time, and at the time I was working for a campaign director, David Braun, who is a longtime California anti-fracking environmentalist. And, you know, we learned so much at that time about what's really happening when it comes to like environmental racism right here in even like Los Angeles and Southern California. And, you know, we saw the dispersal of chemicals over, you know, Black and brown communities just last year from an airplane that, you know, they had an emergency on board and they had to disperse chemicals, and they decided that that was an okay place to do it. And so, you know, we have this repeating pattern, even coming from, you know, Democratic, you know, quote unquote liberal leadership here in California. We have, you know, a governor who has shown himself to be a hypocrite in so many ways. You know, we fight for Medicare for all, and someone like Gavin Newsom comes to progressives and says, you know, give me a chance, put me in power, give me your vote, and we will fight for Medicare for all. And even during a pandemic, this governor has turned his back on so many of his campaign promises and, you know, what he proclaimed were his progressive values. So, you know, we need to keep bringing awareness to things like this, because, you know, when we say that $1 billion is being misallocated for a pet project of a lobbyist, you know, and I come from, you know, I used to be a part owner of a solar business, right? A solar, you know, technical contractor. I could go into it, but I won't. But, you know, at that time, desalination was like a newer technology and people were very interested in it. But the big thing that we knew about it, even as a novice, you know, coming from the solar industry perspective, was that it was extraordinarily energy intensive, right? And we have not solved that problem. So that energy has to come from somewhere. And at a time, like you said, when we're asking, you know, people to conserve, when, you know, we have not only the heat coming in, right? And we have some places in our region that cannot escape from the heat when it comes, right? And now everybody's home. Large percentages of people are home in ways they weren't before. So we're using more and more power, and we're going to have to acknowledge that and deal with it at some point. And when we really need to be addressing the issue of clean water, we need to be addressing the fact that, you know, there's already water wars happening in other parts of the world, in parts of the Middle East and Africa. People are literally fighting and dying over water, right? Already. Things that we thought were like generations in the future are happening at our doorstep. And we saw the failure of the government, of our government during the pandemic. We saw the failure of our government on the 6th to protect the Capitol building. We cannot imagine that there is a plan for water. There's just not. So these false promises and things that lead us in the wrong direction are wasting valuable time and resources where we need to actually be addressing the issue of water. And we cannot answer it in the ways that we've answered it in the past. Here in California, you know, we have stolen water from you know, communities that are more rural and piped it into the cities, right? And the city water has been distributed in unethical, uneven ways, right? So we have the massive things that we already have to address. So it's really offensive of the governor to now layer on new pet projects for his friends during a pandemic. And I'm just so extraordinarily grateful to be having this conversation. And of course, you know, my perspective is always like, what are the broader justice issues at play? And what are the things that have happened in the past that we can inform and learn from? And so while I'm not an expert in this particular issue, you know, I think one of the things that we can do to help, that I would like to do to help, is really amplify this amongst my networks, so that we can make sure that, progressives and people who will activate and people who care know that we have an issue that we need to activate for.
Andrea, what's coming up? I know that there are some very important dates, and what kind of pushback are we giving, if any? Who's doing some of the work? Enlighten us as to what is being done about this, because we're trying to inform the people. A lot of people never heard of this. What are the next steps?
Okay, so one thing first is I want to bring it full circle, because I was a supporter also of the Money Out campaign with David Braun, and the same lobbyist who represents Poseidon is the same lobbyist who got Gavin Newsom to lift the moratorium on fracking, and the same one who basically got him to approve all these fracking wells, most of which are in Latinx communities. And actually, the very same day that Governor Newsom gave this awesome speech on race and Black Lives Matter, that very day was the day that he approved all these fracking wells in Latinx communities. So again, it's just, the
hypocrisy astounds you.
He talks the talk, he just fails to walk the walk just horribly. And again, that goes to that. And then also, Poseidon is very interested in building all these boondoggles next to gas plants that are coastal. So right now we're decommissioning some of these gas plants that are coastal that use a technology called one-stroke cooling, in terms of using ocean water to cool their turbines. So some plants already got rebuilt. So Poseidon wants to use the intakes to do their desalination plant. And they already have their eyes set on El Segundo. So they want to build these up and down the coast, because that, again, is just their business.
That's
so
terrifying.
They want to, again, secure the funding. And they did this already with Carlsbad, where they got money that should have gone to build affordable housing to build this boondoggle. And now they want to do it again. But now, instead of having about $720 million, $100 million, now they want $1.1 billion from CEDLAC. And this is a specific bucket that is used to basically deal with brownfields and any contaminated land, so that we can clean it up and build housing. And so somehow they're going to clean salty water and convert it to drinking water. And that's just horrendous. I mean, and not only is the $1.1 billion at stake, but it's the other 70 cents on the dollar that we could get from the Fed to build affordable housing. So it's double whammy.
Right. We're talking about a lot of money.
And that decision, in terms of the bucket, is going to be made on Friday. And that is going to be, the head of CEDLAC is Fiona Ma. And in the same umbrella, if you will, and again, I have been learning all this because it's very wonky, but it's Fiona Ma, is Gavin Newsom and Betty Yee. And they have a staff that has to look at all the allocations where these funds go. So the staff is heavily influenced by Fiona Ma. And Fiona Ma is under a lot of pressure right now from Gavin Newsom, because again, Gavin Newsom is being advised by Jason Kenney. So there's this whole cabal, if you will, about how we get this boondoggle off the ground. And again, it's just, I mean, it breaks my heart to see so many people unhoused or on the brink of losing the head, or the roof over their head. And it's just morally wrong to give the money to a private corporation, especially a foreign private corporation, to privatize water and jack up the prices and double hit to climate change, instead of building the affordable housing that we so desperately need. So what we need is to get people to call in on Friday and say, we need this money to go to the right bucket, and that's to build housing. period, affordable housing.
Is there a graphic that we can share, or will there be
I'm
one?
working on it. Last week was supposed to be my my week of vacation, and it was more like working vacation, where I found out a lot of this information that I'm sharing with you. So tomorrow I will be working on that, and I'll be sharing it with you. There's a phone number to call. These calls, actually, I was on a call in last December, and I've been on a lot of calls with different government entities. This was just absolutely insane. It was about 250 people on the call, because there's a lot of developers who want money to build housing. And again, there's it's very nuanced, and there's a lot of terminology. And again, because now it's over the phone, I guess more people can, especially developers, can participate. But we really need to really pack that phone line and just say, all the allocation needs to go there. There's also another allocation that people already protested last year in November, because about 400 million went to a train that they want to build from here to Vegas. So some of that money will go to Nevada instead of staying here in California. Again, and that money should really go to build affordable housing. So any project that doesn't build affordable housing, we're losing that extra 70 cents on the dollar from the federal government to build more affordable housing. And right now, we cannot lose one penny to build affordable housing. And the total amount from these bonds is $4 billion. So if Poseidon was to get $1.1 billion, we're talking more than a fourth of that money going to a boondoggle.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. A lot of bad going on here is what I am hearing. And I think it's very worrying, because, to clarify for everyone, this is the state of California we're talking about. For people who live outside of the state, you think, oh yeah, those liberal Hollywood types, they're tree huggers, environmentalists. They're the leftists. But the reality is that even in here, the Democratic Party has a supermajority. They cannot do the right thing on behalf of the American people, or in this case, Californians. And I think that this should be a lesson for all of us, not just here in California, but nationally, to really realize right now, as Joe Biden is going into office in 10 days, that we should expect exactly this kind of behavior and this kind of attitude from our federal leadership. And we should take this as an example of what we need to do nationally as well. So Andrea, I really appreciate having you here and having this discussion with you and Michelle and Carlos, because I think this is a really great blueprint for everybody nationally to see what to expect from corporate Democrats and what to do about it. So please, Carlos, I would love to hear you chime in a little bit more on what we can do and your ideas, what we can do to help Andrea and really to help ourselves to prevent this plant and many more of these plants from being built.
Right. Well, it is super important to have shows like this, to speak about how the issues are being worked, whether it's housing, whether it's homelessness, the environment, whatever the issue. It starts at the bottom. It starts with our communities. It starts by us talking to each other. It starts by us educating ourselves as to what's happening. Where's the money going? Who's handling the money? Who's making these decisions? Who's writing policy? All these things are extremely important, because if we are mad about the outcome of things and we don't like the fact that when we go to the beach and we see a whole bunch of oil rigs out there, then we did that to ourselves for not being educated on the issues and getting involved. So before we panic, we need to understand that these things have been going on for a long, long time. It's just that a lot of people have not been paying attention. But now that we have information being provided, and we have good advocates, again, advocating for our communities. We need to find out how we can get involved. We need to find out, what are the steps that we need to do as citizens, as people that live in this great state of California. What is the things that we can do to protect the already damaged coastlines, to protect the little money that is coming down so that we can provide good services for the homeless or build affordable housing. This is where it starts. It starts right here with information just Andrea is providing for us, because there will be a call to action. And this is why we need people like Michelloe Manos that knows how to get people involved, participating, making those calls or whatever needs to be done. This is where organizing comes into play. This is where, being a strategic comes into play, because we have specific dates that are going to be very crucial and important for us to be making calls, and for us to be writing emails, so that things like this are stopped, and we stop these lobbyists at their roots and tell them we had enough of you. Right now what we need is be able to build affordable housing, and we need to get this homeless or those people experiencing homelessness out of the streets. That's where all the focus should be. And if when we're talking about this kind of money in the billions going to the pockets of corporation, that has to stop, and it stops with us.
Yeah, and to drive home the point a little bit more on this issue, you have to think a little bit in the long term, and imagine yourself right now. You pay your water bill. You're part of a water district, and the people who are on these boards are elected officials. You can even, aren't they elected? You can vote for somebody to be on a water board.
It's on the board, but like the regional water boards, they are all appointed. On the water agency, some of them are elected. And there's also some shenanigans going on with that. Last year for Central Basin, there was actually a bill to get Central Basin privatized, and it was defeated. And it's very likely to come back again this year. So again, water is the blue gold, as they call it now. And another issue with Orange County right now is PFAS, which we call forever chemicals. Mm-hmm. And just to put it bluntly, we do not have enough money to both build Poseidon and decontaminate the PFAS. And it's just, again, another matter of environmental justice to decontaminate PFAS. Wealthy families can afford a whole house filtration system and decontaminate the PFAS from their homes. Poor residents who live in old apartment buildings cannot. So we need to make sure that those forever chemicals that can lead to different illnesses, including cancer, get off their water systems. And the problem with Poseidon is that, even if we get that done and that water gets into the ground, is not going to make the PFAS go away. I mean, period. If anything, it could add boron, which is another chemical, into the groundwater. So again, there's no reason to build a boondoggle like that.
Right. So these water boards, and you pay the city generally for your water usage. Is that correct, Andrea?
Yes.
Right. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's for the water agency. For the regional water boards, all of those are appointed by the governor. Yeah,
but when you pay for your water usage, and where does that money go right now?
So it goes back to the agency, and all of that goes back into paying for infrastructure and stuff like that, but it does not go to decontaminate, whether it's lead or PFAS or whatever that may be. So that has to come to a separate pot.
Yeah, and so these agencies are regulated, this infrastructure is monitored. Is that publicly owned infrastructure?
It's supposed to be public, and but again, like the problem with PFAS, for instance, is that all those are compounds that are made from private companies like Dow Chemical and others that came up
Yes.
Scotchgard and other type of chemicals that end up in our groundwater. And we really need to be addressing that. And Orange County is not the only county with that issue, but it's one of the ones that is mostly impacted by them.
Right. And who sets the rates, the water rates right now?
So it depends. It's really wonky because we still have to buy most of the water from Metropolitan Water District. And that's one of the issues that we have right now, because they can actually approve that 400 million subsidy to Poseidon.
Mm.
So then all of us in this call can end up paying for Poseidon, even though we don't want it or we don't need it.
So I just want to clarify, what is the big difference? I mean, right now, aside from the cost of the desalination plant, because yes, that costs more, right? Because for various reasons to get the water from there is going to be more expensive. But these agencies are supposed to be government agencies to some extent, correct?
Well, Metropolitan Water District is kind of like a private and public agency, and it's like a wholesaler of water. So they get water from, like you said, like from the Colorado and from the Delta and from groundwater, and then they kind of distribute it, if you will. And they set some of the price, and then of course the regional agencies have to then also add some of the costs for the infrastructure. And that's
right. So what happens then if Poseidon, if you now have a desalination plant, your water is now coming from a Poseidon plant, that money goes directly into the bank account for Poseidon? There's no like government agency?
Is going to sell it to the Orange County water agencies, and then they will have to pay Poseidon. So people living in Savannah, people living in Fullerton, all those will get a rate hike.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, they get a rate hike. I guess I'm wondering about, I'm trying to figure out here, I've been asking a lot of questions because I'm trying to figure out where this becomes, at what point does this become like a fully privately owned water distribution, or like the water being owned by Poseidon versus publicly owned water? I mean, are we already in a situation where we have like privately owned water that we're using? I guess you're saying like the Metropolitan Water District?
That some of that water is private, like Poseidon water is private water. Like right now in Carlsbad, that's private water.
But aside from Poseidon, because this is still a relatively new thing, I mean, traditionally, what has been the situation?
No, well, it depends on the source of the water and water rights. So the thing with California is really interesting on how water rights were allocated over a century ago, and that's kind of and that's why we're in this hole. And even some projects like the Delta Tunnel that are highly controversial. And again, I think we really need to be looking at local water, not only in terms of emissions, because right now almost 20% of the electricity that we use in the whole state is used to move water from north to south. And that's a lot of emissions, almost 30% of the gas. So if we in the South, in Southern California, invest more in water recycling, in stormwater capture, in efficiency, in making sure that people have drought tolerant or even native landscaping, that will go so far in terms of not only control emissions, but also making sure that we have are more resilient in terms of water. When we had that big drought a few years ago, our emissions went down with it because we didn't have to move so much water from one end to the other. So again, it's a comprehensive solution, and more than anything, we really need to protect the human right to water, because again, the ones who end up suffering the most are the ones who can least afford it.
Yes, Andrea, we have again. There is a hearing coming up on Friday. This coming Friday. Tell us a little bit more about the hearing. What is going to be like? What is going to be said? And what is it that we need to do? Because Michelle, this is part of the stuff that we need to be really paying attention to, so that we can see how we can get the people involved. So, Andrea?
So the meeting is going to be on Friday, and I'll circulate a flyer around. But it's basically CITLAC is going to allocate different pots of money, and one of them is for the California Pollution Control Financing Authority, the CPCFA. I know it's a mouthful, and that's the program that could either decontaminate land to build this train or build Poseidon, or they can decontaminate brownfields to build housing, or a parking lot or something to build housing. So we really need to make sure that every single penny goes to build affordable housing, not only because it's only the money from CITLAC, but also the money that is going to come from the federal government. So they might not say Poseidon is going to get this money, but they can say CPCFA, which is its Pollution Control Authority. Right now, the way it's penciled in is $1.8 billion. And if it's that much, we feel that that's basically putting in the money for Poseidon and putting in the money for the train that we do not need. We do not need people going to Vegas to bet money on anything. What we need is to build affordable housing in California.
So again, on Friday, as this hearing is taking place, you are going to be providing us with a number for people to call.
Correct.
And what is specifics? Because we need to find out specifics on what we need to know, and what we need to do.
So we need to call, and we need to make sure we tell Fiona Ma and every member of the board that we need every single allocation to build affordable housing. Not to build any boondoggles that will privatize water, or any train that goes outside California. The money needs to stay in California, and the money needs to go to build affordable housing. Every single bond needs to go to build affordable housing, because not only we need those bonds, but we need the matching funds from the federal government.
Right. Michelle, what are some ideas you think that we can do as grassroots to be able to mobilize some of our people? Make calls, whatever. What some ideas that come to your mind?
Yeah, well, definitely, an organized calling campaign, which I'm sure is probably already in place amongst groups. But, I encourage you to, for instance, like include us on your emails, and, we'll make sure to amplify that message. I would be interested in knowing if, Sunrise or Extinction Rebellion or any other environmental groups are planning anything. Calling campaigns are excellent. I've seen some wonderful examples of social distance protests, or very small things like press conferences, or street art. I'm a big fan of raising awareness in dramatic ways. That's ways that we can reach outside our bubble. Of course, we our little grassroots movement here in Los Angeles, we're capable of moving mountains when we all come together, and we can certainly get several dozen folks, or maybe a couple hundred folks, making phone calls. But I would love to know, like, what should we ask of our artists? What should we ask of our creatives? Because I think there's an opportunity to perhaps catch a wave, in the media as these important dates are coming up, and perhaps capitalize on some of that. And that's what I would do if I was being asked, for support. My brain starts like thinking out the different ways that people generally like to get involved, and how do we give like sort of each category of people something to do,
Right. And this is important because this is how we organize. We learn we've been doing this already for a while. We have been organizing through social media, etc. And right now, as all these things are developing all over the nation, we need to understand, and I'm speaking to progressives right now, we need to understand that, we need to be engaged and involved. We need to be participating. We are paying attention. We're starting to pay more attention, but being able to to get involved, on the issues that we care about. This particular issue is important because it touches not only climate change, but the water rights of people, and also, the money
Public health. Yeah.
spent. So there is a lot of different groups here that should be paying attention. Andrea, uh, tell us anything else that you feel that the kind of support that is needed right now. Is there anything else?
Well, I mean, this is like the first step. Then we are going to find out more about when the final allocation is going to be done after this. And then also the next step in terms of regulatory mandates is we're going to have a meeting likely in March with the regional water board for their discharge permit, because right now they're trying to figure out what the mitigation is going to be. What happened with Carlsbad is that they're like, okay, we'll give you the permit and then we'll figure out the mitigation. And that plant opened almost 5 years ago, and they still haven't started the mitigation.
Yeah.
So now they're for this one, they said, no, you will have to start the mitigation when you start discharging, not 5 years after the fact. So that's one thing. It still has to go through the Coastal Commission, and then it has to go back to state lands. So there's still a few places where we can, show up and say this is just not, kosher. And with the Coastal Commission, fortunately, in 2018, they passed the very first environmental justice policy. So that means that every project and every policy that comes before them has to be viewed through those lens. And there was another project in terms of a desalination plant by Calam in Northern California that was about to be denied. And the night before, Calam pulled their permit. It was about to be denied based on an EJ policy. So I know they're going to retry again. So we really need to be focused on, when we go before the California Coastal Commission, on just testifying this does not pass the smell test. This is going to be an environmental justice disaster for people who live, low-income people in Orange County. And I know that a lot of people just think Orange County is Newport Beach or whatever, and only wealthy people live there. But we really need to remember that there's a lot of low-income families who live in Santa Ana and Fullerton and other places. And the other thing that we have to bear in mind is that Poseidon is an all-out campaign to greenwash this desalination plant. And they even claim that this is going to make the human right to water better, which is not true. And then they even say that this is going to be carbon neutral. And the way they say that is because they're going to be buying offsets, not only out of the state, but even out of the country. And some of those offsets are in biofuels, which we know that they're going to hurt other communities in other places. And the ones out of the country are in Ecuador, in forests. So we know that that's just, 100% not green by any means. So we really need to point out that, this whole thing about 100% carbon neutral is not there. Just the fact that they're applying for a benefit with financially to say that, we're going to clean up the water, we're going to depollute the water or whatever. This is a polluter that's going to pollute more using funds to decontaminate something. It's just ludicrous in so many levels. So
many times that they're going to come back and clean up. They're going to be responsible, and they're not. And they're not going to do that. They're in for the money. That's it. I know that we're coming to the end of the hour, but very important, next Friday, there will be a hearing that we need to be engaged in, that we need to be participating, perhaps making comments. And we're going to work with Michelloe. I'm going to be talking to her and you, Andrea, Margaret, so that we can come up with a first step plan of what we need to start doing. And not only that, but inviting our allies, reaching out to Sunrise Movement, to Extension Rebellion, and see how they can get involved, see how they can participate. Because when we bring people together, that's how we win. It's by us bringing people together, by recognizing that this fight is not only our fight, but it's everyone's fight. all of us got to be getting involved because it affects all of our lives. It affects everyone. And especially in this age that we live in right now, these times that we live in right now, where every penny counts, as you say, Andrea. Every penny should be, looked at. And right now, we have a major housing crisis. We have a major homeless crisis. And we need to be thinking how we're using our money. And we got to tell the governor that we are watching and that we want the money to be allocated to where it's most needed, and that is to housing and our home, those experiencing homelessness. Any final thoughts, Michelle?
No, I'm just once again really grateful to be having this conversation, and more things are coming to mind. Tactics that we've utilized in the wake of the pandemic, like video campaigns where everybody records their own 30-second or 1-minute video, and then some great editor compiles them and puts a great beginning and end to it and stuff like that. Things that we can submit to, like Now This and People for Bernie and these big platforms where people are ready to get involved and get active. We can push out calls to action if we have decent content to provide to the viewership of other large voices in our networks and stuff like that. So I encourage us and you all who are on the front lines of doing this organizing right now to perhaps help get some of that content together, or reach out if you need help getting some of that content together. And that's, I think, one of the best ways that we can really get the message out right now is digital content, and then asks from people and supporters that they can do from home. So
great. Margaret?
Yeah, everything that we've discussed today about this company, Poseidon, has really irked me. I'm like really, really annoyed because, we're in a climate crisis and we're in the middle of a pandemic where people are losing their homes. They're on the verge of being evicted. They've lost their jobs and they can't afford to pay more. I mean, on the financial side, on the economic side, they cannot afford to pay more for their water. And then on the climate side, it's just the hypocrisy of these corporations, the lack of care, the short-sightedness that they have, where they think all it matters is if they make a couple extra bucks this year and they have no concern for the future. And the problem is that the future is here. The future of climate change is already here. We are running out of time to do the right thing. And to see these companies act as if there is all of the time in the world, or they just don't care because they're going to build a house somewhere in the Arctic for themselves and everybody else can fend for themselves, is just really irritating. And I really want everyone who's watching to feel a little bit of anger and let that motivate you, because we need something to drive us. And I think anger right now is a good feeling to have, because this is really upsetting. This is our lives. This is our future. So many of us, especially people in their 20s and 30s, are feeling like, what future do I have? And teenagers, what future do I have in this environment where nobody is caring about the climate crisis? What is the point of getting married? What is the point of going to school or having kids if this is the kind of future we're going to end up with? That's what a lot of people are feeling right now, and it's not fair. So please, you be active, do something. Even if you can't leave your house, you can probably make a phone call. So I know that at some point this information is going to be dropped on this page, on the pages that you're watching right now, and we will definitely share that and try to promote it again, because it's so important. This issue is so important on so many levels. I just want to punch some of these guys. It just really makes me angry, because this is our planet. We have one planet. We're killing off so many species, and we didn't even touch on the fact that when they put this water back in, it's hot. It's the high salinity means low oxygen, so it's going to kill off fish. It's going to kill off the life. It's going to increase algal blooms. It's such an environmental nightmare. These are not the solutions we need when we go to solve this climate crisis. And it's something that we all need to really be wary of when we start listening, when we start hearing the government and corporations saying they have a solution. We really need to look into it and make sure that it truly is a solution and not something that down the line is going to create another crisis, right? We want to solve this one and get it right the first time. So please really hold on to the anger and do something. That's my message for tonight.
And then, Andrea, any final thoughts that you have for us tonight?
No, I'm just grateful to be on with you tonight. And again, we just cannot afford to have a boondoggle like this. Not now, not in the future. And we need to protect the human right to water.
Thank you. Michelle?
No, I mean, I gave my final thoughts. So I'm just looking forward to the calls to action and the content to share. And, I hope that folks who are, because things like this come in waves, right? And we've been focused on certain things for a while, and there's plenty of things to be angry about, as you were saying, Margot, and but there's also a lot of distractions, and this is something that is a long sort of slog. You know what I mean? It's not the sexiest issue, and it's not gonna have like this great, tipping point overnight. But this is one of the most dire issues of our time. And I just want to say thank you for pointing out, that the young people are not going to tolerate this. I mean, I'm 35, and as a millennial, I'm part of the first generation in recent history to not be able to do better than our parents, right, economically. And one of the things about the groups that we mentioned, like Sunrise and Extinction Rebellion, is that they're made up of kids who saw what I say kids, they're adults now almost, but they saw what happened to my generation, and they said, we do not accept these conditions. So I'm excited by the fact that they continue to fight, and I hope that we can build that coalition together, because the underprivileged people whose neighborhoods this is happening in, and the indigenous people whose land this is happening on, and the young people who are going to have to deal with the consequences are the ones we need to be listening to. So again, just thank you for having the conversation, and I look forward to hopefully a really big, effective coalition to deal with this.
Yeah. Before I turn it over to Margaret, I'd just like to tell you that we appreciate you so much, because and that is all of you out there, the audience. We appreciate you so much because you have always been very supportive of the movement and the issues that we care about. Keep fighting. Don't give up. Stay focused. Now is the time. As long as there is breath, there is hope. Margaret?
Thank you, Carlos. As long as there is breath, there is hope is such a great way to end this. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You've been watching Stand Up, Fight Back. We had two special guests today. That's Andrea Leon-Grossmann and Michelle Manos. And we've been talking to you about this crazy desalination plant that the governor in California is very happy to have produced here. So let's fight it. Let's stop it. And of course, let's have all of you tune in every Sunday and watch our show. We're on at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and also on occasion on at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, right here on the Bernie Sanders Brigade page, and also simulcast on a few other pages and on Inside Out News on YouTube. So tune in, and we'll see you soon. Stay safe and wear a mask.